Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our CCO 2.0 Rules Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you very much for being with us in person and on the phone. Before we get into some opening remarks and process-related discussion and move right into the substance, I will tell folks, I think many have heard, we are suffering some intermittent internet outages across the state system. So if you are trying to log on our guest network and you are unsuccessful, we apologize. We anticipate it may be up and down the better part of the day. Similarly, people on the phone who we are very pleased to have you with us today. It is a voice over internet phone. We are crossing our fingers that it stays up through the duration of this call. If not, we ask that you please bear with us. We will make every effort to get right back on the line with you. So thank you and our apologies in advance for that. So again, good morning, welcome. My name is Ralph Magrish. I'm a policy analyst with the Health Systems Division here at the Health Authority. I will be leading our series of general RACs the next couple weeks. Just a little bit of history and background as to process. We'll move through this fairly briefly, but it is important context for you to understand the scope of this endeavor and exactly what we're doing, as it may have bearing on your comments. So this rule rewrite really came out of recognition of need for us at the Health Authority. The existing rule framework that we have today, as many of you know and understand, were likely not sufficient to implement CCO 2.0 in breadth and depth. To that point, we made a concerted effort to revise these rules to make changes to improve readability and alignment with the new CCO contracts. We want to thank the Department of Justice for their collaboration throughout this process. Just a couple high points, and I will ask people, it's going to be imperative that we do use microphones today. With that said, they are very sensitive to ambient noise, so any paper shuffling near the microphones around the room will likely project through the telephone and through the system, so please do be mindful of that. With that said, when you speak, we will ask that you do use the microphone. So just a couple pieces about the process itself and the efforts that we've undergone. So to improve readability and minimize repetition of rules, we've made changes to edit for brevity and clarity, removing duplicate content, renumbering to group like topics together, removing outdated terms such as DMAP, prepaid health plans, fully capitated health plans, need I go on. We've went through efforts to correct and remove errors in citations and typographical errors and renumbered where appropriate. And lastly, we've renamed rules to clarify the purpose and intent of each rule. We've also changed some of the definition structure, as you likely have seen, from universal definitions and removing a number of those to localized definitions, and changes to align with the CCO 2.0 contract. In doing so, the Health Authority and the Department of Justice analyzed existing CCO rules to determine which requirements would be more appropriate in rule and which in contract, using the following criteria. Bilateral rights and obligations between the CCO and the state are defined in contract. Third-party rights, and by that we're speaking of OHP members and providers, those obligations are defined in rule to a large extent, with a high-level structure for the Oregon Health Plan and CCOs being set in rules. Lastly, we are repealing approximately 14 rules, and the structure that we are adopting, that I trust you all are understanding at this point, really kind of moves us into four kind of zones or sectors of rules, including core structural rules, which we'll dive into today, contracting rules, coverage rules, and then financial reporting rules. A little bit about participation today. I believe on the table for our RAC participants there was a document, CCO RAC participation. I'm going to walk through that very briefly with you. The RAC's role is advisory and consensus is not necessary. Our goal here today is to seek public and stakeholder comment to the maximum extent possible. What that means for us is the less talking we do through this short time we have together, the more we are able to listen to you and capture input. So that is our hope, to gain as much as we can from you today. Any individual is welcome to attend this meeting. It is a public meeting. We welcome you on the phone, of course. However, only those specifically invited to participate as RAC members may participate in this discussion today. What to expect as a RAC member. I, the facilitator, will lead discussion of rules with proposed changes that significantly alter current rules to ensure that we collect input in these changes. Rules that have undergone review, and I'll speak to this a little bit as well later, that have not undergone substantive reviews, we will not allocate time to today. But I'll speak to that in a little more detail shortly. For substantive changes, we will have a number of subject matter experts with us who we will introduce momentarily to provide context and framework for the proposed changes. How you can provide input to us. This is very important. When you speak, please state your name and the organization that you are representing today. Today will not be the only opportunity for you to provide comment based on this RAC today. We are allowing RAC members this is very important, 7 business days from the day of which that RAC is occurring, so today, close of business, next Tuesday, to submit additional written comments to us at the CCO 2.0 rulemaking inbox. You can do us a big favor, we ask this strongly of you. When doing so, please, in the subject line, designate or write RAC member comments for general RAC number 1, 2, or whatever RAC you may be attending. Make it much easier for us to manage those and ensure that we capture your input correctly. So that for today's RAC will be a hard stop at 5 p.m., close of business next Tuesday. All others that are with us today or on the phone will have opportunity to submit public comment, which we will accept during the last 10 minutes of this meeting. During our break today, we will go to the back of the room and ask individuals if they wish to sign up for public comment, as we will solicit people from the general public on the phone. We will limit that to 10 minutes and divide it by the number of participants. So if 5 people sign up, they will be afforded 2 minutes a person, etc. The next steps specific to this process for folks in the community or participating by phone or listening in the back of the room that are not seated on the RAC with us today. You will have opportunity to comment on the final version of the proposed rules. The process that goes forward from here, the last part of October, the Health Authority will file notice at the Secretary of State's office for these rules. On or about November 1st, the final draft rules will be posted in the Oregon Bulletin, open for a public comment period from November 1st to November 18th, with a public hearing on November 15th. So the time between now and that period in October, the Health Authority will review and process the comments received both in the room and writing over the next couple weeks of this process. So that's the basis of this. We will get through introductions in just a moment. Lastly, before we do introductions, as you can see, we have a very aggressive agenda today. So as a procedural matter, all current rules that are being repealed, of which I believe there are 14 or so, as a procedural matter, these rules are going away forever. They are coming back, renumbered, revised, easier to read. With that said, we will note those that there are not substantial changes on, but we will not engage in lengthy discussion on them today. Based on that, if there are issues or concerns you have with those rules that have been rewritten where there are non-substantive changes, you are welcome to submit your written comments for those during the course of the next business week. So we're not denying you the opportunity to comment on those non-substantive changes. We're encouraging you to do so in writing to expedite the process for us today. So thus I will be making mention of all rules, but we will focus on the substantial changes. You obviously have a very large group today. We have 40 plus members with us. I don't yet know how many participating by phone. With that said, as we go through each rule, the process will be I will ask for a show of hands who wishes to speak to a specific rule or change or offer comment, both in the room and on the phone. So in the room, we will catch by hands and acknowledge people. On the phone, we will ask you to state your name to get into the queue for those that wish to offer comment. For folks on the phone, if doing so as a member of the RAC, please be ready because we will alternate, hopefully back and forth between phone and room participants for who will go first. And let's get started with introductions. So again, I'm Ralph Magrish. We will work the room from my left.
Kim Steuben-Rauch.
Tamara McNabb.
Bill Bushka from IHN CCO.
Sean Parkman, SAIU 503.
I'm Jeremiah Rigby, representing Care Oregon, Jackson Care Connect, and Columbia Pacific CCO.
Jessica Adamson of Providence Health and Services.
Wendy Chavis, Houston, Oregon, CCO. Dana Jorgensen, Vincent Medical Services, representing OTC. Bruce Curtis, OTC.
Stan Gilbert, Climate-Based Behavioral Health, and representing the Association of Oregon Community Mental Health Programs.
Stan, can I pause for just a moment to make sure people on the phone are hearing well? Can we get a listen check from someone participating on the phone that you're hearing names okay?
It's hard to hear.
Okay.
Yeah, not so much.
Okay, we're working on that. Can I ask then that we do pass the microphone as introductions go around the room? Thank you.
I'm Stan Gilbert. I'm from Climate-Based Behavioral Health, and I'm representing the Association of Oregon Community Mental Health Programs.
Michael Sorensen, Healthcare for All Oregon.
Cynthia Ackerman, All Care. Jane Conley, Smithfield Family Physicians, representing the Oregon Academy of Family Physicians. Jane Hanaback, Pacific Source. Jessica Sayers, Pacific Source. Victoria Kelly, Rock, Recovery Outreach Community Center. Laurel Swerdlow, representing Planned Parenthood Columbia Willamette and Planned Parenthood Southwestern Oregon.
And thank you.
Sturgeon Willamette, Rachel Arnold, Culture of Oregon. Julie Spirit, Oregon Young Plants. Lundgren, Cedar Hills Hospital.
And folks on the phone, we're working on addressing that feedback. Please bear with us, okay?
Heather Jeffress, Oregon Council for Behavioral Health.
Let's try a different way.
Brooks, Eastern Oregon,
Just
CCO.
ask him to.
Jared Hefner, San Rafael Hospital and Clinics.
Robin Traver, Health Alliance. Rachel Hungerford, Legal Aid Services of Oregon. Beth Englander, Oregon Law Center.
Should be.
Bruce Thompson. I am representing Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocates, an organization that's been advocating for healthcare for over 30 years, healthcare reform.
And Ford Options for Southern Oregon.
Randall Clem, I'm with the Managed Healthcare Pharmacy, Long-Term Care Pharmacy, representing Long-Term Care Pharmacy.
Jeffrey Pierce.
Anna Klingbaum with OHG.
Tanya Elmore, Quality Assurance Agency.
Allison Bonge, Quality Assurance OHA.
Melissa Hanks, Deputy Director of the CCO 2.0 project for OHA.
All right, thank you. We are going to go ahead and get started. Just a couple last pieces as noted. We will take a 10-minute break at what appears to be any logical intersect around the 10:30 hour, where we will make sure we capture those that do wish to submit public comment. Please make sure everyone in the room has their phone ringer turned off or on vibrate at this time. If you need, restrooms are behind us. And I will also open out, we did have a request coming out of last week's RAC, what the process for documentation minutes or notes for these rules advisory committees will be. We are actively working. These are being recorded to have them posted to the web later this week. So stay tuned. We will provide updates through the week as that process occurs. All right, let us get started with 410, 141, 3,500 definitions. I do want to offer one request that I think will be efficient for everyone to the extent that you can honor it, recognizing that there will be the need for some specific questions of our SMEs, subject matter experts, and that is that if you have opportunity, and folks will move to you on the phone for introductions just momentarily, that when we do open for comments, if it is an opportunity for you to frame a comment in the context of if this then that, please do. And in that context, I mean, if you may frame a question, if the intent of the rule change is to accomplish X, then our comment on the matter is Y, rather than ask a question, is something this or is something that. If you need to ask a question specific for understanding, please do so. We will make every effort to answer those in a timely manner. But again, to help expedite the conversation, that's our ask of you today. Let's move to people on the phone for introductions.
Marcy Lynn, New Directions, Northwest Baker City.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to have Kim call out names and take roll for phone participants.
Good morning. Joelle Archibald. Please just indicate if you're here. And I didn't catch everybody in the room, so if you could just let me know when we get by you, that'd be great. Martha Aravalo. Rachel Arnold. Here. Kristen Bork. Is she here?
Yeah, she's back.
John Curtis. Kristen Downey.
I'm here for Kristen Downey.
Okay. Lakeisha.
Present on the phone.
Okay, thank you. Jesse Egan.
Present by phone.
Emily Farrell. Kevin Farrow. Thank you. Annette Fowler. Emily Goranson. I'm sorry, Ariel Goranson.
Present on the phone.
Thank you. Hillary Greason. Renee Hancock.
Present on phone.
Victoria Kelly.
Present.
Kirsty Kirk-Lewis. Aaliyah, I'm sorry, Kujala. Okay. Cami Miller.
Present.
Debbie Morrill. Jessica Nagelkirk. Sean Parkman.
Here.
Tanya Pritt. Nancy Rickenbach. Jessica Sayer.
Here.
Ashley Smith. Julie Spirit.
Present. Oh,
Was that Ashley or Julie?
it's Ashley.
Okay, thank you. Julie's here. Dana Stieringer.
Right here.
Tina Strahan. Laurel Swirlord.
Here.
I'm sorry, said that wrong. Alexica Tucker. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you for that. So as you can see, we have quite a large group today. Let me keep this away to avoid any feedback. So we will move in to our first rule, and that are proposed changes to the definitions rule 410, 141, 3500. I will run through very quickly what the notable changes are, what has been relocated, and what has been revised, and then we will open for question/comment there. Again, hoping folks have had ample opportunity to review, and that comments can be fairly limited or contextual to a specific question or definition. So of the notables, we have added definitions for area agency on aging, aging and people with disabilities, the authority, behavioral health, which was relocated from a prior rule, the definition of client, the definition of department, health systems transformation, added a definition of oral health, OHP, moved a definition of ombudsman from a previously repealed rule, added definition of Oregon integrated and coordinated care delivery system and of primary care provider based on OHP general rules. We have relocated the following rules to local definitions, adverse benefit determinations, alternative format, applicant, award date, cold call, deleted the definition of community standard, contract relocated contract renewal, dental case management, DCBS reporting CCO, ENCC Exceptional Needs Care Coordination definition. The word entity. Health-related services, moved to the health-related services rule. Replaced intensive care case management with intensive care coordination. Removed redundancies of limited English proficiency as already addressed throughout the rule. Revised definition of MCE, managed care entity, to include coordinated care organizations and dental care coordinations. Relocated the definitions marketing, medical case management, authority reporting CCO, prevalent non-English language has been moved to local definitions, as has readily accessible, and the term RFA, or request for applications, and we have revised the definition of Indian. Is there anyone in the room or on the phone that would like to offer comment or question as to the proposed changes in our definitions rule? I'm going to capture one in the room, 2 in the room, 3 in the room. Can I show any other hands? 4, 5, okay. And real quick, Dana, sit tight. On the phone, may I ask people who would like to ask questions or speak to these to state your name?
Ralph, this is Nancy Rickenbaugh. I'm just going to submit mine in writing.
All righty, thank you, Nancy. All right, and I think, Dana, if you will, individuals, when you speak, please again state the name of the organization that you're representing today.
Hi, Dana Sterner, Women at Dental. Just 2 questions. One, it sounded like you said we added an oral health definition.
Yes.
I didn't see it in the rule that was provided.
For that, we apologize. You are correct.
And then the second question I had was around managed care entity definition.
Yes.
I'm wondering whether the phrase "with the state" needs to be added so that an entity that enters into a contract to provide services.
Yes.
So that might include providers. So if you say an entity that enters into a contract with the state to provide
We
services,
can't hear on the phone.
Okay. So we're going to do the best we can with this large group, and I think she was speaking with the microphone. That folks on the phone, we're going to do the best we can to communicate and repeat questions. The individual in the room noted 2 things: that we did omit the definition of oral health. We will get that and provide that to you for comment, and a notation specific to managed care entity of a recommendation or request to include the words "with the state" following contract to provide services of managed care delivery. And next person in the room, please.
Hi, this is. Can you hear me? Yeah, this is good luck. Red light goes on. Oh, there we go. Okay.
All right, there we go. This is Jessica Sayers with Pacific Source. Section 8, behavioral health definition. If the goal is to define behavioral health, our suggestion is to add developmental disabilities into that definition to be in line with behavioral health immigration statutes.
Thank you very much for that comment. We do appreciate that.
I do have 2 more.
Go for it.
Section 42, mental health organization. Is this definition actually relevant anymore? Because we do not define MHOs or having MHOs because of immigration.
That is a good question, and we will take that under advisement.
Okay, one more.
Thank you. Go for it.
Section 44, the net premium definition. We suggest that the qualified direct payments and MCE tax be added to that definition.
Thank you. We appreciate that as well.
And that is it.
All right. Thank you very much. Next person in the room.
Can you please summarize what was said? We couldn't hear it.
Sure. 3 specific comments. 1, to revise and add to the definition of net premium. 1, to amend the definition of behavioral health. And if I could get a little help on the last one.
Mental health organization.
And the questioning of the appropriateness or necessity to have a definition of MHO at this time. And next in the room.
Rachel Arnold, Health Share. I just wanted to second the request to add MCE tax and QDP into 44 in the definition of that premium.
And Rachel, can you say that again, please?
Wanted to second the request to add back in MCE tax and QDP to the definition of net premium, which is section 44.
All right, thank you for that. I know Jeremiah Rigsby, can I get a show of hands? I think we had 2 folks in the room, then Jeremiah will circle back to you. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Bruce Thompson from Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocates. Looking at item number 31, the use of the term holistic care, I wonder, is a current value that's being offered going forward with healthcare is equity. And I ask if including holistic care or equity in some way into item 31 would help with item 31. Because I don't see equity listed anyplace else in the definitions, and it seems to me it should be.
Okay, thank you.
And a second one on number 46. So Ombudsman Services is asking if there is local Ombudsman service available through the MCE. The statewide Ombudsman services quite complex and difficult to access and seems to be overrun with because of lack of staffing, perhaps given the number of requests that are being put in. So the question is, would a rule regarding local ombudsman at the MCE level be helpful?
What I can speak to is later in rule, and I think farther in the agenda for either this morning or this after one, are inclusions in rule language of requirements of obligations of managed care entities or CCOs to provide awareness or notice to their membership of ombudsman services. Cannot speak to the potential or capacity for a regional or local system at this time, but we hear what you're saying and have captured that. Thank you. And we're staying on this side of the room.
Should I just speak loudly?
Please.
So a couple of things. I think that...
your name, please?
Beth Englander from the Ordinance.
Thank you, Beth.
First, the health-related services definition in 29. I realize that you're sending folks to a different section of the rule, but there are references to flexible services and community benefit initiatives inside that definition, and I don't think those I think they should be defined here.
Okay.
In addition, I think some repetition of definitions is not a bad idea, especially because it saves people from, if somebody is trying to find where what something means if they're in one place, sending them to a whole other rule is not always the best solution. I also think a broader and better definition of intensive care coordination is appropriate for this section, because this is just too thin of a definition for people to really make sense of even what it is.
Okay.
And lastly, could you tell me if you're changing definition 32 to just say Indian? And I'm wondering if the decision to do that was run through the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and if not, I'd like to request that it be.
Sure, we will ensure that it is. I can't speak with an absolute certainty that it was at this time, but we can honor that request for sure.
Okay, and if not, and maybe consult the folks that consult with OJ on tribal affairs.
Yes. All right, I think I had one more hand over here on the phone, 2 in the room. I'll go to the phone and then we're going to move through definitions. And again, people will have opportunity to provide additional comment in writing. We're going to take these folks here. I think Bill Buska.
Thanks. Bill Bushka with IHN CCO. I agree with Beth about the definition 35, intensive care coordination needs to be better explained and built out. but also the linkage that these services have in the past or in other contexts been labeled as ENCC. What is described as intensive care coordination is significantly different than ENCC, and not quite sure what the reference to ENCC in that context is necessary for.
Okay. Thank you. And down, we get a microphone to the woman middle of the table. Thank you, Bill.
Red is on.
Hi, this is Wendy Chavez of EOCCO. I want to expand on the intensive care coordination, or request that it is expanded, and also ask for an exceptional needs care coordination definition as well.
All right. Thank you for that question and comment. We appreciate it. We will take that under consideration, a request for an ENCC definition. Thank you. And was there anyone lastly on the phone that wished to speak to the rules or to the definition section? All right. Our next rule will be 410-141, 3501. This is the administration of the Oregon Integrated and Coordinated Care Delivery System Rule Order of Precedent that speaks to just that, the order of precedent and rule and contract. There have been no substantive changes to this rule. To that point, unless anyone wishes to speak or ask a specific question to it in the room or on the phone.
This is John Curtis.
Okay, John, John, hold on just a moment. Can I capture names only for people on the phone right now that wish to speak? You are the first one. After you, who else on the phone? Okay, John, we will go to you first and then to the room. Go ahead, sir.
And I apologize. I got in late and was not able to identify myself. John Curtis, a member of the Disability Services Advisory Council in Jackson and Josephine County. And my comment actually goes to the prior rule, and I wasn't able to unmute quickly enough to offer this comment. But if I could throw this out, the word access and its cognizance are thrown around in the rules quite a lot, and I'm wondering if that could be fleshed out in a definition, especially when it's used as a proper noun.
So the request is to flesh out a context or definition of the meaning of the word access as a proper noun for everyone in the room. John, we appreciate that, and we will take it under consideration.
Oh,
go ahead, sir.
I have one further. Item 28, or definition 28, health literacy, which I find is a very good definition. I've looked and have failed to find its usage in rules, and especially in the rules regarding accessibility.
Okay, and I appreciate that. We will explore that and do a keyword search and affirm the working locations of that. Thank you. All right, in the room, can I just get a show of hands beyond Dana Steringer, folks wishing to speak to this rule? So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to limit it to 5 on this. Dana, go ahead.
Just in that first sentence, it's an incomplete phrase. The authority and its may allow.
And we thank you for that comment. Yes, it is. And next person in the room. Same thing. All right.
I have a question, which
Sure.
is, is there a plan to match, to do rule changes inside the 141, inside the 410-120s, so that the new definitions?
I believe there are a handful of rules and definitions, including aligning definitions of oral health, that will coincide with this process.
Okay, but it's not planned yet. There's no timing on it. I'm worried that
Sure.
there may be contradictory things.
Sure.
So fee-for-service folks will may have.
Sure. So what I can say is that there is a concerted effort that any program that is impacted, and I say this beyond just the 120 being the general rules, there is a concerted effort, including our behavioral health colleagues who are with us today, to look at all rules impacting CCOs and to ensure that appropriate changes are made to those to align with CCO 2.0 rules and contract. And staying on this side of the room, I think there was one or two more. I'm sorry.
It was just supporting Dana's comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll move over, I think, no, gentleman in the blue shirt at the end of the table.
Healthcare for All Oregon. What is the word that's missing?
So I can tell you, it's, assuming you want, this is Dana Stern from Climate Dental, assuming you want the rule to match what the current rule, it says it's the authority and its division of medical assistance programs and AMH may adopt reasonable and lawful policies. So I'm assuming you're adding that back.
Yes, thank you, Dana. All right, we apologize for that omission.
There's no DVAP.
Right, or likely the health authority, you will find that that is one of the broad terms that we are using throughout the rule review. I'm going to take Bill Buska, and then I'm going to move us along.
Bill Bushko with IHN CCO. Under Section 2, this is different than what is in the current contract in the order list, and state plan is not listed as one of the things, so it's just inconsistent with what's currently and what has been in contract.
Okay, so I will speak to that, and when I spent no substantive changes, I will speak to that in the context of those of us that work in the space and Medicaid policy generally affirm that the state plan is specific to fee-for-service programs. This being a managed care environment, that this is the order of precedent specific to managed care.
Oh, it's in the contract. It's the first statement in the contract.
In the contract. Okay, I will follow up on that. I thank you for bringing that to our attention. All right, I'm going to move us along to our next rule, 410-141-3505. This is the use of subcontractors. This rule has been renamed and undergone significant revision. It formerly was known as implementation and transition. I want to welcome Allison Tonge, who is our interim CCO contract administrator, to join us to speak to changes.
Good morning. So the primary change in this rule was renaming the rule and then changing the scope of the rule so it applies only to subcontractors of managed care entities. Anything that was, any other pieces that were in the prior rule were removed or were shifted to other sections as appropriate.
Are there specific questions related to this rule? Sorry? Yes, it was implementation and transition. So this being a rule that underwent significant review, we're not going to read the entirety of it, but we will take questions and comments, starting with the gentleman here in the room in the beige shirt. Apologies, I don't recall your name.
I'm Bruce Thompson.
Bruce, thank you.
Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocates. Retired family physician. In 1A, there is a rule, MCEs remain fully accountable for the performance of all subcontracted work, and I'm wondering, is there a rule written as to how this will be evaluated?
Do you want to speak to?
No, generally anything to do with evaluation has been left in the contracts themselves, because there could be specific portions that are specific to the type of managed care entity, and it wasn't deemed appropriate to put it in the rule. But we can certainly take that under advisement.
Yes. And let me just get a show of hands in the room, the totality of who wishes to speak here. I'm going to look around this direction. We have 1, 2, 3. All right. 3 in the room. Will there be individuals on the phone that wish to ask questions specific to this rule? Okay, let us start over. Go ahead. Sorry, Jessica.
Looking at me?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were looking over there.
Sorry.
Okay, this is Jessica with Pacific Source. The question or the comment is on 1 little d big B, copies of all subcontracts. In the 2020 contract, that language was changed to be an attestation that we have a contract with the subcontractors and not that we provide copies. So consider looking at the 2020 contract to update that language.
Yes, that language will be updated.
Thank you.
Thank you. And additional questions or comments in the room? I think there were two others. Jeremiah and who? I can't see. I have a little blind spot. Okay, same comment. Thank you. Jeremiah Rigsby.
Jeremiah Rigsby with Care Oregon, Columbia Pacific, and Jackson Care Connect. I appreciate that clarification on attestations, and this gets to that a little bit. I think there's more specificity in what you would want CCOs to report regarding delegated agreements and activities here, and some of that arguably could be protected by trade secret because there's a fair amount of financial arrangements of participation that happen within our subcontracts. So I don't know if you need to speak to that in the rule, but a little bit of a concern from our folks, just that because because it's broad here, with especially in section 2, big A, 1, delegated activities or obligations could include, I think, a lot of things that would be protected by trade secret, but also subject to a FOIA for submitting everything to you guys. So FOIA is probably the wrong word, but records request.
All right, thank you for that comment. So in summary, concerns specific to disclosure of potentially proprietary business or trade secrets in those contracts, subcontracts. All right, we have captured that. I thank you. Were there any other comments specific to this rule before we move on? All right. Thank you, Allison. All right, we are going to move to 410-141-3510. This is provider credentialing and provider contracting and credentialing. I will just tell you at 70,000 feet what some of these changes are, and I will introduce Tamara McNatt from the Health Systems Division to speak to them in greater detail. So, as noted, this was renamed from Operation and Provision of Health Services. The rule clarifies the purpose, clarifying the rule's purpose as defining requirements for CCO provider contracting and credentialing, and amends the title and text accordingly, and relocates text to other sections, including governance requirements and other general requirements, and removed references to the Oregon Common Credentialing Program. We'll ask Tamara to introduce herself and speak to some of the detail behind that.
My name is Tamara McNatt. I am a manager within the Medicaid system. And just to reiterate what Ralph had mentioned, there was the role name change and number change. There was removal of the common credentialing requirement. That program was suspended July of 2018, so that was removed for that purpose. There was also removal of subcontractor language that got moved to the subcontractor role. And then the rest is really just admin format changes for numbering and whatnot. So those were the substantial changes.
And we'll also note that a number of these revisions and changes came from implementing Oregon Health Policy Board Policy Option number 34. Yes, thank you. I'll start. Anyone on the phone wishing to offer comment or ask questions specific to this rule?
Nancy Rickenbaugh.
All right, Nancy, hold on just a moment. Anybody else? All right, may I get a show of hands? I'm seeing Jessica Sayers from Pacific Source in the back of the room. May I get a show of hands for others who wish to speak or ask questions on this rule? All right, we are going to limit this to two. First, Nancy Rickenbach, and then Jessica Sayers. Nancy, go ahead.
So throughout this section, it's saying CCO rather than MCE.
Okay.
The next one is 1B. It says CCO shall screen, and I think it should say participating providers.
Thank you for that.
1C, I believe that first sentence is duplicative throughout. We already know that we're responsible for the entire thing, so I'm not sure why we're saying it again. And as well, at the end of that first sentence, it says state versus authority. Throughout the document, it kind of goes back and forth between state and authority, so I think it just needs to be consistent. Pick one.
All right, we will do that, and I thank you for your comments, Nancy.
Before you go, Oh, go ahead.
I have one
Nancy.
more. So, let's see. It is one capital A. I don't know, capital A. I'm not sure. It's at the bottom of the page. It says have been terminated from OHP, and I think you meant to say Medicaid, because OHP is the Oregon Health Plan, which is a program.
Yes, EA. All right, EA, I see that. Thank you very much.
Yep, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Sir, I did hear you on the phone. I want to respect the order the people requested. What is your name? I will capture that, and then we'll come back to you after the person in the room.
John Curtis.
All right, John, we'll be back with you momentarily. Jessica Sayers.
Hi, yes, Jessica Sayers, Pacific Source. This is in relation to Section 2, B and C. This talks about CCOs declining to contract with providers, and that there's certain things we have to do. One of them is that it doesn't preclude us from establishing varying reimbursement rates under Sub B. But then in Sub C, it says that we cannot have varying reimbursement rates with specialists and non-specialty providers. We feel like that language is conflicting, and it's not really supporting the value-based payment efforts that the CCOs are required to obtain.
And thank you for bringing that to our attention. We will review that. All right, John on the phone will be our last comment on this particular rule. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Yes, my comment goes to...
And I'm sorry, John, if I could ask you to state your organization again for everyone in the room.
Certainly, I'm sorry. Jackson and Josephine County's Disability Services Advisory Council.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And the comment goes again to access and accessibility, and particularly to enforcement. So I understand the first part, number one, mentions the failure to meet objective quality standards. I'm particularly concerned about deaf community and the ability for CCOs to have a little bit of power to enforce the non-compliance, any non-compliance that might be reported of providers failing to meet accessibility requirements.
Okay. Can you summarize that for me? I'm reluctant to try to summarize that. I think you covered a lot of ground there, and I want to make sure that we capture the essence concisely of what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to do is put a little more teeth into the rule so that those CCOs that notice providers who are having problems meeting standards required for accessibility have some ability or mechanism to ensure better access.
Okay, we are tracking that. I thank you, sir. Okay, that will be our last comment on this proposed rule. We are going to move on to 410, 141, 3515. This is the accessibility rule. I want to welcome a couple people here and acknowledge at the table both Anna Claybaugh from our behavioral health team and Melissa Hanks from our project team. Both of them will be helping and facilitate this discussion specific to accessibility. So there are obviously significant changes to this rule, including most notably the removal of community standards and inclusion of specific behavioral health access standards and monitoring systems. I will note that the changes to this rule were made in alignment with Oregon Health Policy Board policy options numbers 17, 21, and 25. Rather than go through and feature and illuminate specific pieces that were changed, I'd like to open up. I suspect we have a fair number of questions here and comments, so I'd like to start the queue by a show of hands in the room who would like to speak or ask questions to this. Can I see hands high, please? All right. I'm seeing one hand on the left side of the table, and then we're going to work our way around. Before we do so, sir, from SEIU 2 in the room on this side, can I get a check-in and see who would like to get in the queue on the phone that would like to ask or offer a comment specific to this rule?
Well, should we go page by page on this, just because
John Curtis.
Okay, John, we will do that. Thank you, Beth. All right, let's do that. Beth Englander from the Law Center, thank you for that recommendation. Let us go page by page. So to that point, let us first entertain questions or comments specific to items 1 through, let's go 7. And IHN?
Nope.
Okay. John, just sit tight for a moment. We'll get to you. Thank you.
Sean, Sean Parkman, SEIU 503. So just a comment here for consideration. Understanding the intent of the of number 1, sufficient number of providers. We might need to consider in rules defining what that means, because I mean that could be endlessly debated about what that is. We could put that in contract, but so that's just a point there.
Okay.
And then staying on the first page, this is a comment question. It doesn't need to be answered now. Just putting it out there that defining a specific geographic, like minutes to travel, makes sense. I understand the intent. Just for keeping options open for the intention of having centers for excellence arrangements that are outside of that boundary, yet having the opportunity to compensate members for traveling past a certain distance in order to make it to a centers of excellence as part of the contracting. This rule may disallow that kind of flexibility if it is written so strictly in rule, with the understanding that trying to limit travel for members is important. So it's a balance thing.
So to summarize that, sir, if I can, just for the benefit of everyone in the room and on the phone, it was potentially the request for some acknowledgement of centers of excellence and people traveling outside their geographic service area to receive specialty care and a recognition of that, more or less. All right, thank you. And staying in the room on the left side.
My comment, Dana Jorgensen, my comment was basically the same as John's. I think this needs to be further defined, both A and B, to determine what is accessible and what's considered sufficient access, especially with weather involved.
Okay, thank you for that. And continuing around the room.
Mine was on a later page.
Okay. And still continuing around the room. Later page. All right, anyone else?
Later page.
Later page, okay. Beth, go ahead, I think.
Okay, to start with, I may be just piggybacking on the person on the phone's earlier comment, but the title of the rule, accessibility, I feel like it's not quite accurate. Accessibility is generally a term for making sure that things are accessible to people with disabilities.
Okay.
And this rule is, to me, it's about both network adequacy, and you do also address disability accessibility inside the rule, so maybe those two terms need to be both identified. But accessibility doesn't trigger, network access isn't what you think of when you see that in a table of contents, and I think so. I think it's important to.
Okay. And thank you for that. Would you wish to submit potentially, or make a recommendation towards a more broad encompassing?
I think network adequacy and accessibility might.
Alrighty.
Should probably give it a little bit more thought than that, but.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Also. Or maybe network adequacy and disability accommodation, something like that.
Okay.
In sub 1, well, first of all, I guess I'd like to start out just by giving an appreciation for how much work was done to change this rule, because it was a lot of work with really important intention behind it. So I want to express appreciation. In sub 1, you're calling out network adequacy as sufficient in number and geographic distribution. We think it's important that there be an identification also in network adequacy of the qualifications of providers and experience of providers, which often is potentially more important in the behavioral health context, but but that's a critical part of network adequacy, is that there be people with the sufficient experience, qualifications, credentials, et cetera. And the same comment goes for sub 3, when you refer to appropriate choice for members, that the idea being they have the appropriate choice amongst of people with subspecialties or experience or specific trauma, training, etc. In sub 4, a question quantitative network access standards specified and published by the authority. Later in this rule, it seems like there are some, but is there going to be an additional document that will be published by the authority?
I cannot say at this time.
Okay.
And that is I cannot say, and that I do not know. That is I cannot say because I don't wish to be transparent. I cannot say because I do not know.
Okay, well, maybe my comment then is specify when and where that would be published.
Great.
If it's anything other than inside this rule.
Great.
And let's see. I think that's it for page 1.
Okay, thank you. And was there one more in the room before we go to John on the phone specific to page 1? And thank you, Beth. John, you are up, sir.
Yes, I think this rule is right for the application of the definition health literacy, but specifically to page 1, item number 8, it seems that particular provision might be able to incorporate health literacy.
All right, I have captured that, and we appreciate that comment, sir. Thank you. All right, we will move to page 2. In actuality, I think, let's take this all the way through because this speaks to, let us take this all the way through the bottom of page 3, the end of number 11. I think that's the logical break point here. Let's do that. Can I get a show of hands in the room again? And we're going to go in the other direction this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can I do a phone check and see who wishes to get in the queue on this?
John Curtis.
All right, John, we will come back to you, sir. All right, please go ahead. And can we borrow a microphone for her?
Ann Ford with Options for Southern Oregon. So the question I have is for routine behavioral health for non-priority populations. Is this clarification, is this 14 business days, 14 calendar days, just some?
My understanding is that it was calendar days, but I will follow up on that.
Okay, we will affirm that. For folks on the phone, just to repeat the question of whether the trigger was 14 calendar days or 14 business days for access. And
a follow-up question is there any way to have this say something about appointment being offered instead of appointment occurring, because we frankly have no control whether or not members show up for services. And we can offer 15 appointments within the first 2 weeks, but if they show up for none of them.
Okay, so I hear you loud and clear. It was an important question you asked. I'm actually going to ask you to rephrase it as a comment to help us.
So my comment would be to say that the appointment being offered within no more than 14 days and 4 appointments offered within 48 days instead of occurring.
Okay, offered versus occurring in summary, is that correct? That's correct. We thank you for that. And continuing around the table, I think we have Rachel, got a couple folks before we get all the way down there, sorry.
Just to respond to the last comment, I think were you talking about sub 11 in your comment that you just made?
I was looking at, I think it's 13 or 11C, sorry. Big C.
Okay, I'll just point out that that 11 in the body of it it says a CCO would be, or MC would be required to ensure scheduling and rescheduling of appointments. So I think that is anticipated already in the rule. Not that the appointment has to occur.
Well, except for in that one in C, it says occurring. It doesn't say scheduled, it says occurring.
So we can review for consistency, certainly.
In sub 9, up at the top, there are requirements for making other services as accessible to members for timeliness, amount, and duration, and scope as to those services are to other patients within the same service area. And I assume that you mean by that other patients not enrolled in the CCO? Maybe
Correct.
private insurance, et cetera?
Correct.
So that might be helpful just to clarify that. But then my comment is that how will anyone know what that standard is? I mean, that's in some ways kind of reverting back to a community standard. And so I guess I'm asking for there to be some requirement that be measured in some way and then identified that standard would be meaningless if no one knows what the appropriate timelines are for people with private insurance or not enrolled in the CCO. Also, I think at the end of that, sub 9, when you say access care from providers outside the service area, I think it would be more appropriate to say outside the network.
Outside the network, okay.
That might be outside the area, but it might be inside the area, but
outside of network. I thank you for that, Beth. I will also note that one of the changes as you're in sub 9, and I think this speaks to a comment made earlier, one of the pieces of new language there is that second to last sentence. And I will tell you what that is. So if the MC is unable to provide those services locally, and this is new language, by providers sufficiently qualified and specialized to treat the member's condition. So that unto itself is new language. I do think to a degree that speaks to a previous comment. Apologies, I don't recall who made it, but the comment about ensuring that there was appropriate, both culturally appropriate and accessible specialty care. So, Beth, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just two more things.
Sure.
One in 10, I think the intention is that for the Oregon Health Authority to be asking the MCEs to monitor this network advocacy for all of their members, but this rule seems to limit it only to people who are age blind or disabled or have complex or high health needs, multiple chronic conditions or behavioral health issues. Well, you need to read it. But I think it's really important to, within network adequacy monitoring, to call out those populations specifically. But I would recommend that it be network adequacy have to be monitored for everyone.
Everyone, okay.
And I think you need to do that for compliance with the federal law, just for network adequacy in general.
Okay.
And then lastly, I don't know really where to put this, but you've got network adequacy defined for a lot of different services, but access to by phone nursing advice doesn't seem to be on there, and I think that would be an important one to add.
So you said life phone / nursing advice, or a triage line, line of sorts?
Sort of advice line.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're going all the way through 11 on the next page? Is
Yes.
that right? Okay, so then in, so you've got, sub C, behavioral health, little double I, specialty behavioral health care for priority populations. I think in the little 2, it would be, I'd recommend adding in victims of domestic violence or trauma victims. Because it doesn't seem like, that might not be covered by the rest of the paragraph. I think that those are important populations. And I had concerns about sub little BI, which says, it's basically saying children with serious emotional disturbance, any limits that the authority may specify in a contract or sub-regulatory guidance. So that seems like that's basically taking away from everybody who doesn't look at the contract frequently the ability to understand what network adequacy is for that population. So I think it needs to be in rule.
Spelled out in rule.
It needs to just mirror what's in contract.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. And continuing around this side of the room, headed down, anyone between you and Rachel Arnold from HealthShare. Rachel, I think you have the floor.
Rachel Arnold from HealthShare. I am, let's see, maybe C, behavioral health, A, urgent behavioral health care for all population, and then it says immediately. To me, that suggests either a crisis or emergent situation. Doesn't seem to square with urgent, so if we could just requesting some additional clarity around what OHA means around immediately.
Okay, Anna, you captured that?
Yes, I got that.
Great, thank you, Rachel. And continuing around the room. All righty, and staying, anybody else around this side? And apologies, I don't catch your name by the big post here.
Wendy Chavez from CCO Connect.
Yep.
I just want to follow up with Josephine County's comment on routine behavioral health care for non-priority populations in C, 11, page 3. We couldn't find any reference in CFR or other requirements for 4 additional appointments within a 48-day time span, and just wanting some clarification as to where that was.
Sure, and I will defer to Anna Claybaugh, and also be mindful that this implements policy board recommendations that are outside of federal requirements above or beyond, so I'd welcome Anna to speak to that.
Yeah, sorry, I got discombobulated with the notes. Can you say the question one more time, please?
Specifically to the 4 appointments, including the second appointment within 48 days.
So that was put in to ensure that we had engagement measures also, so that people weren't just getting an assessment and then that was it. Regarding further detail on that, I can write that down and follow up for you also.
Okay. Well, this is typically our psychiatrist indicated that 48 days for 4 additional appointments were not necessarily usually something that we would abide by for non-priority populations. Also on page 10.
And Bam, I'm going to ask you to speak up. I'm concerned that people on the phone may not be hearing.
Sure. On the end of 9, locally providers sufficiently qualified and specified to treat a member's condition. Does that say essentially that if there is some availability in network that we would deny an out-of-network request?
This rule is not about the denial of out-of-network request. It's about defining what the parameters are to make sure that services are available. So I would say that we hear your comment, but that it is not directly. This is setting the framework. It's not about oversight or compliance.
And the third comment that I have is regarding
warm lines, or is it acceptable for telehealth, the behavioral health services to be provided?
I'm sorry, regarding what was the first word?
Any of the appointments outside of the initial or the assessment for behavioral health, is telehealth available? Would that be, if it's outside of the 60-mile radius, would telehealth services being made available, would that count?
I believe so, but that's something I will write down and ensure giving you the correct answer.
All right. I'm going to stay on this side, and I'm going to come back to you, sir, but I'm going to ask Jude because it helps us manage the time that when I do ask for a full circle around that you get your hand in the queue right then. The gentleman from SEIU, go ahead, and then Mr. Buska, and then, sir, we'll come back to you for the last comment.
Hi, Sean Parkman, SEIU 503. So this is a comment. Maybe just as an outsider, this is confusing only to me. But in the section C, subsection II, it starts off pregnant women, veterans, and their families, etc. I'm seeking clarification. I feel confused by the rules related to immediate assessment and entry to then be placed on a 120-day wait list. The relationship between immediate entry and then being on a wait list for 120 days doesn't resonate. Same comment for the next following rule. So maybe everyone understands what that means, but it just doesn't make sense.
Anna, do you want to speak to that for a moment?
I don't think I have specific commentary on that.
Okay. But the point is, and if I can paraphrase, a request for recognition of some alignment between a wait time and availability.
Yeah, I mean, if the intention is to ensure that these special populations in these circumstances have immediate access to behavioral health care, as is best practice, that if there's a crisis, 24 hours is the best practice, that someone is actually in treatment, not that they are in a wait list.
Understood.
Then the rule should reflect the best practice.
Okay, thank you for that.
And I would like to also add that we do indicate that if we're unable to have admission, that interim services are a requirement as well. But I have
Okay.
your comment noted. Thank you.
And there's a typo, it says series, not services.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bill Buska, IHN, and then the gentleman here, and then I think we have one back on the phone, John Curtis.
Okay, my comment is on 10, section 10. The term, like in the third line, term behavioral health issues, it is an extremely broad term, and if ask that you narrow it down at least to behavioral health disorders or something a little bit more narrow than behavioral health issues. In 10B about priority access, priority access is not really a defined term, so not sure what priority access means. It would be helpful to have a little bit more clarity on that. On the next page, towards the top, under behavioral health, the big B, I'm not, oh no, skip that one. So going down the page to Roman numeral 6, children with serious emotional disturbance. It needs a definition. It's not defined anywhere in any rule or in contract, but it's used. So
Of serious emotional disturbance.
yes, serious
Okay.
emotional disturbance definition would be really helpful.
Thank you for that comment. And then one more in the room from the gentleman down the way a bit, and then we'll go back to John on the phone.
Michael Sorensen, Healthcare for All Oregon, and I was just asking that sufficiently qualified provider have a definition as well. And then just a process question, if the documents that are available online could have pages added to them so that we can follow them by page, that would be awesome.
Sure. So we can do that on, as many of you have noted, we've provided you the ability to download and look at them individually, and we've done a rolled up version with the table of content. We will get the rolled up version with the table of content with page numbers on it. All right. And John Curtis on the phone, last comment on this particular piece of this rule before we move on?
Yeah, item or number 10. Again, right for the term health literacy. I don't know where it would be woven in, and also perhaps English language. What's the term? Deficient or
limited English. LEP, limited English proficiency?
That's the term.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Anything else? Nope. All right. So we will continue with the remaining. I think let us try to go through the rest of this rule. May I get by a show of hands in the room? All right. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And anyone on the phone to get in the queue?
John.
All right, John, John, we'll circle back to you. Let's start on this side of the room, back to the gentleman from SEIU, please.
Sean Parkman from SEIU. So I'm looking at the rule number 12, subsection C. I guess it's a little bit more of an overall comment from A, B, and C. I think that the rules would be stronger if they had some description of time frames. So the way it's written is that MCEs shall implement procedures in order to essentially ensure, my interpretation of the intention is to ensure access for interpreters and language services and so on. Ensuring, adding some description of how available, like what does available look like for those interpreters, that there's a certain time frame within an hour, within 30 minutes, they will have someone that can speak the language as opposed to just a blanket. They'll have a procedure in general,
Sure.
I think would be appropriate.
All right, we appreciate that. And staying on this side of the room, friendly reminder, please speak as loud as you are able and state the name of the organization you are representing. Who's next on this side? Go ahead.
Sure, if I'm next or not, but I'll take the turn. My name is Leticia Sains. I'm with Multnomah County Mental Health and Addiction Services. I wanted to comment on 12D, as in dog. Culturally appropriate, in my opinion, needs to be defined, and I think that definition should include as kind of nod to representation, that demographically the provider is representing the members that they're supposed to be serving. And I also think, maybe not as part of D, but somewhere in here there needs to be a reference to outreach for communities that have historically been underserved. And I think whatever this ends up being called, accessibility or something like that, we know that, what are organizations doing to look at their membership, groups within that membership that are traditionally underserved, and how are they helping those groups literally get connected to services in an active way.
Thank you. And continuing around the table.
This is Jessica with Pacific Source. I have two comments. One is on number 13. This is about collecting and actively monitoring provider data. The last part of that sentence talks about call center performance. We do not typically delegate call center to providers, so I'm interested to learn more about the intent from the OHA around that.
Sure. I think the intent of that was to ensure that any access, whether scheduling or care coordination, occurs through a central point of contact at the respective CCO, that there is a measurement or a performance expectation of response time.
Okay, so not their actual wait times and answer rates. This is just strictly around scheduling?
As stated in black and white at this time, yes.
Okay.
So.
The second question or comment I have actually is on number 18A.
Okay.
Reporting on the number of individuals who receive supported employment and ACT services. It says at a frequency to be determined by the OHA. I would ask that the OHA consider what that frequency is so plans can prepare for that and build that into infrastructure for 2020.
Sure, we will acknowledge that. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. And continuing around the room. I think you got it.
Dana Seringer, Atlantic Dental on 12 little e. MC shall ensure the provision of certified or qualified interpreter services. Halfway through it talks about oral care, and in parentheses, when the MCE or DCO is responsible for oral care. I believe this is left over from when some CCOs didn't cover dental. So I think that reference can probably be taken out.
All right, thank you.
And it also appears previously in the rule. I forgot to mention it in number 10.
All right, thank you for bringing that to our attention. And Rachel.
Rachel Pelcher. My question was already covered, so.
Okay.
Hi, Alexa Lundgren, Cedar Hills Hospital. 11, Roman numeral 6C, behavioral health care, non-priority. Can you clarify non-priority population?
Sure, and I'm going to just repeat that, so I think I had a hard time hearing you down here. The question was specific to 11C and defining, sorry?
Non-priority population.
Non-priority population. Anna, do you want to take a shot at that?
I am assuming it's referencing our definition of priority population, so anyone who does not fall into that list.
So the response would be by default everyone else, but if you wish to offer comment based on that response, please do. Okay, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Staying on this side of the room, was there anyone between you and Beth from the Law Center? All right, Beth Englander from the Oregon Law Center.
Thank you. By 12 little d, ensuring provision of services that are culturally appropriate. I think somebody else already said that needs a definition.
Yes.
I would second that, but also I'm not sure it's clear what happens, what an enrollee's recourse is if they're not getting what is what's defined here in the network adequacy rule, and I think it might be helpful to make some verbal link between lack of network adequacy and lack of culturally appropriate care and the right to disenroll or request disenrollment.
Okay.
Because I think that's otherwise these would be words written on a page but wouldn't have any impact, any likely impact for individuals. Let's see. Also, sub 16, sub A, talking about actual wait times for scheduled appointments. And I think that's a really helpful paragraph to have added. 60 minutes is a maximum, but once again, what recourse is there if a CCO is regularly having wait times beyond that? And I guess I'm mirroring the last comment I made, which is I think there needs to be some linkage between if this is, first of all, a requirement to monitor that in particular, whether wait times are exceeding 60 minutes or not, because if it's happening frequently or on a large scale over a long period of time, then that would indicate a lack of network adequacy, and I think it needs to be clearer than what people can do. Again, like have some reference to how that's enforced. So both monitoring and enforceability.
And so monitoring, enforceability, and then to make sure I do a listen check, this as the last one, some inclusion of recommendation or acknowledgement as to what may be relevant to a grievance and appeal kind of process. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the most logical connection is the disenrollment process, or to request an out-of-network provider who. But I guess that would fold itself into the appeal process. I mean, maybe people just need to be getting something. Nobody gets something if they're just waiting at an office and it's been more than 60 minutes. But I think if that does happen to someone more than a couple of times, then maybe they should have the right to be informed.
Okay.
If there is not network adequacy for what they need, that they have some recourse. It won't be obvious to people what to do.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you.
And then in sub B, I think this is a really helpful section. I think I'm going to request that there be an addition that practices or providers can't, I may be using the wrong term, but they can't fire or punish an enrollee for not showing up to appointments if the not showing up to the appointment was an EMT failure.
Okay.
Because I think that's happening, and it's cascading a problem down to where no one wants it to happen. And I guess under 18, I just had some concerns that CCOs are being asked to make sure that assertive community treatment services are available, which sounds great to me, but my understanding is I don't know that that's available in every community right now.
I believe that is something that our Oregon Performance Plan is addressing.
Yeah, and I believe that was part of our settlement. I can't speak to the detail of that, but part of the US DOJ settlement.
Yes. Okay, I just didn't know I had been.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Beth. This gentleman, and then we will give Jeremiah a last call in the room, and then back to John on the phone.
This gentleman is Bruce Thompson from Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocates, and I'm speaking in support of some of the items that Beth just mentioned regarding monitoring and how that information gets used. And that gets back to the concept of a local ombudsman within the MCE, so that members, clients have an access to report their displeasure with the services they are receiving, particularly within the disabled community. And I'd like to speak to that. And I'd like to echo John's from SEIU's comments regarding time frame for 12. implement procedures for communicating with and providing care to members. There needs to be a time frame centered around that. And I will address it most specifically with reference to 12E. MCEs shall comply with requirements of the American Disabilities Act. What is the monitoring and what is the access for the client and the member to report non-compliance? For instance, is it reasonable for a client to wait 4 months for a battery replacement for their wheelchair? So I have intimate knowledge of this. My son, for instance, who is confined to a wheelchair. Is it reasonable to put in a request, a formal request, and for a replacement wheelchair, and after a year, he is not in that replacement wheelchair? And that alters his life because he does not have access to the things he normally would have access to with a good wheelchair. So these are some of the specific issues that need addressing in terms of client experience at the local level rather than at the state level. Do I need to comment any further on that?
No, we appreciate your comment. We appreciate you personalizing it and making it very real for everyone in the room. And we hear you loud and clear. So for that, I thank you. And I think we're going to have one last comment in the room.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Just a general comment, sort of building on MCE shall ensure the provision of services that are culturally appropriate and making that an enforcement. I think that with mandatory enrollment, we don't want to set up an incentive for people to disenroll if they don't like the provider. I don't think we have an all-willing provider system with coordinated care. We want to make sure that the provision of services are as culturally appropriate as possible. We also want to make sure we get people in as quickly as possible to get the services they need at the right time, the right place. And so balancing those two things I think is important. But as far as enforcement goes, I think this probably sets up a cause of action with the courts if CCOs aren't complying with a lot of this aspirational stuff, which is dangerous. But it is also how you hold CCOs accountable. So would just like to comment that you don't, it's hard to vote with your feet in Medicaid because I think that means you disenroll from a CCO and go into fee-for-service, which is against the ideal of the program. So enforcement might need to look a little different, and that's actually probably its own RAC. And to be honest with you, that's a whole set of rules probably about what to do in that situation. So,
all right. Thank you, Jeremiah. All right, we're going to take the one more comment from John Curtis on the phone on this rule. We will then pause for a 10-minute break. John, go ahead.
Yeah, let me make sure. Am I off mute?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so again, Rule 12, right for incorporating the health term that I've forgotten.
Limited English proficiency?
Well, yeah, but there's also the health literacy.
Health literacy, okay.
Health literacy, as far as language, and there's a question, I guess, comment to limited English proficiency. It's just come to my attention the last couple of years working with the deaf community that they have often a need for a certified medical interpreter. I believe that's the term. And it amounts to a second interpreter that's skilled at communicating the medical jargon to a level that fits with the non-English speaking patient. Does that make sense?
Yes, I believe it does. So am I hearing a request for inclusion or recognition of certified medical interpreters in this rule to do a listen check?
Correct.
All right, we've got that. Thank you. All right, it is just about 10:30 at this time. What we're going to do is take a 10-minute break. Before everyone gets up, though, we're going to go off mute. Experientially, when we get a lot of commotion in the room, it's hard for us to hear who on the phone may wish to offer public comment. So if you will just bear with us for a moment before we break. And then I will come to the back of the room and ask if there are any additional people that wish to speak for public comment. All right, we are off mute now, so everyone that has been on listen only previously is able to speak. Are there individuals that wish to sign up for public comment? All right, I believe we captured one gentleman earlier. We have you, sir. We're going to go back on mute on the phone. We will reconvene at 10:40 on the button. Thank you. Are we back on listen only for everybody else?
We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Yeah, why don't you switch and let Lisa sit? Oh, come on. All right. All right. Thank you again, everyone. We have just finished a brief break. We will continue with OAR 410-141-3520. This is record keeping and the use of health information technology. I want to introduce a couple people from the Oregon Health Authority here. I will ask them to introduce themselves, their role and what they do, and they will help facilitate the next couple of rule sections.
Hello, I'm Lisa Bowie, OHA Quality Improvement Director. I have a cold, and I may put my sunglasses on because I get migraines. There's covered all my health issues.
I'm Jackie Fabric, Behavioral Health Policy Analyst with the Health Systems Division.
Hi, I'm Kristen Borg. I'm with the Office of Health Information Technology, and I'm a lead policy analyst.
All right. Lisa, would you like to, and if your eyes are sensitive, I can try to help today and maybe highlight some of the noted changes, whatever's your preference.
You go first.
All right.
I lost my voice.
All right. So for people that do have hard copy up on their screen,
I will take questions.
She will take questions. So the notable and substantive changes in this rule occur in items 7, sub A through D, and 8. I will not read those out loud to you. We'll take a moment and let you review them. Again, this rule is open in its entirety, so if you have questions or comments, when you're ready, please raise your hand. Please, anyone on the phone, speak up if you would like to speak to this. We'll put you in the queue. All right. Beth Englander from the Oregon Law Center is first in. Go ahead, Beth.
Thank you. Sub 2, participating provider will charge member for duplication costs. I was hoping to recommend that there be a provision that people can review their records electronically if they if they don't necessarily need copies and can't afford to pay for copies, but would like to review them. Because frequently that's a lot less expensive.
Okay, we will take that under advisement. Thank you. And still in the room? Anyone else? Anyone on the phone? All right. I do also want to note that the changes in this rule do tie to 2 specific Health Policy Board options, numbers 32 and 33. So if that creates any questions or comments or feedback, we're of course happy to entertain those. Shall I take the silence in the room and on the phone? Is no one wanting to offer comment on this or still reviewing? Unless anyone raised their hands, we're going to suggest that there are no comments beyond what was received by the Law Center on this. Friendly reminder, if you do have comments for these, you are welcome to do so in writing. I will take this opportunity to point out, I had a note from a colleague that I peeked at during the break. Apparently during my introduction, when I spoke of the need to respond and provide comment within 7 days following the RAC, I was told I used the word business days. And it was noted that unless I provided that level of clarity, I would get the question, does 7 business days actually mean the following Monday? No, 7 business days. Apologies for that. I am walking it back. It means 7 days. So close of business next Tuesday, full stop. I appreciate that. All right, we are going to move on to the next rule, and that is 410-141. 3525 outcomes and quality measures. This implements Health Policy Board option number 19. Our subject matter experts here are Lisa and Jackie, tied to both the measurement and outcome piece and behavioral health changes. So specifically, as you review this, number 5 is what actually implements Policy Board recommendation number 19. We did migrate some content from the old 0200 rule that was repealed. We have updated terminology and replaced several references to aged, blind, or disabled who have complex medical needs, etc., or members who are in the ICC program, and as noted, we will speak to that later as well. The gentleman from SEIU, by show of hands, who else would like to get in the queue on this in the room? So I'm seeing SEIU, the Oregon Law Center, and the gentleman here. And on the phone, anyone wanting to get into the queue? All right, the gentleman from SEIU, please.
Sean Parkman, SEIU 503. So with the understanding that I have, on the one hand, there are metrics that are attached to incentive metrics handled by metrics and scoring, and then there's also number 5, which has to do more with internal quality improvement projects related to subsections A, B, C, D, and so on. Related to that, so section 5, its subsections. I would advocate for having in rule more specific accountability related to those quality improvement, internal quality improvement projects. I understand that they're internal, that's the point, but some attachment to an external review, whether it be by OHA. I understand that at the end, the evaluation is available, but there's also there has to be a prioritization process, I would assume. You can't do all of these quality improvements at the same time. So, like, how do those quality improvement priorities get decided? What role does some of the community-based organizations have in deciding those priorities, and especially considering one of them is diversity and capacity of the workforce. So it just feels like that could be a very closed-off system that doesn't really have an attachment to accountability until pretty much it's all over. So I'm just comment that to consider the possibility of having some kind of external accountability related to that type of activity.
Okay, and we thank you for that comment. I will invite Jackie, if you want to speak to that or not, as part of the workforce development piece tied to behavioral health and implementing this as a policy option.
Yes, thank you for your question. Yeah, so this is, as we mentioned, related to policy option 19. I don't think I have any additional comments at this time. I thank you for your feedback, and I noted those comments.
Okay, and staying on this side of the room towards the end of the table.
Cynthia Ackerman from All Care. This is directed to Lisa. I guess I'm looking at this section and seeing an absence of a term, the TQS document, and is that supposed to be under 8? little b, the transformational metrics, it's just a bit, I was expecting a bridge between the TQS requirements and not seeing anything that references that phrase.
Look under section 11B. So again, the CCOs or MCEs are supposed to conduct a coffee program as by federal reg 438.330. And then one portion of that deliverable to OHA in monitoring of a quality program is through what Cynthia's referencing, the transformation quality strategies, which is one deliverable to indicate how their quality program is going, and that's under 711B. Does that cover it, Cynthia?
Yes.
I wasn't going to turn this whole rule into TQS.
Yeah.
And additional comments in the room or on the phone? And I think Beth, anyone going around the table before Beth? Nope.
Thank you. Could I request that in sub 3, the end of the paragraph, information can be requested from the authority or viewed online at Metrics and Scoring Committee website? Could we just get links in there so it's easy for people to get to what the metrics are? Because I think that's really kind of opaque for a lot of people.
Sure.
How are the what specific things that the CCO is required to report on? And then I think in 5 sub A, in our opinion and for our clients for local Oregon Law Center and legal aid, detecting underutilization is maybe the key to the entire healthcare transformation through use of managed care. And just having that one sentence is not enough. So we're requesting that that section be fleshed out with specifics a lot. So giving some guidance to CCOs as to specifically what to do in order to detect and report on potential underutilization, and of course overutilization is important to monitor as well. I'd actually like to request a separate rule advisory committee or time to talk about that. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would have opinions about that, but I feel like this is it's the crux of the success of this entire program, and this isn't enough to give any guidance as to how to really monitor it.
Beth, can I ask if you are making a request for that, can I ask you to maybe speak to it for just a moment and what you would envision or hope to see emerge from that process?
I'd like to see, a list of categories underneath A of things that CCO needs to both monitor and report on in terms of how many denials were issued. There are some other states that have really looked at underutilization monitoring, and I think we could learn from them. And I think that it's so important that we have to give at least a baseline if CCOs want to look at other things in terms of what monitoring underutilization. I would be completely open to that, but I think there has to be at least a baseline of things that have to be reported on to show that the underutilization is being evaluated.
Okay. So, and I'm seeing some affirmative head movement in the room there. Let me, multiple in fact. So first let me acknowledge thank you for that, and we will take that request under advisement. Second, let me speak to this group for a minute and do a gut check with you. It is just before 11 o'clock. We are doing well on time. I will say that one of the challenges in structuring content and organizing these meetings is to try to predict with some rhyme or reason how long any given piece of conversation will take, and allowing ample time to do justice to all of them. We've managed the clock very well here. I anticipate that we probably in the remaining 3 rules that have very sparse changes, we've got some time. So what I will put to the group now is that a conversation that this group here today wishes to engage in for, say, the next 20 to 25 minutes to begin that conversation, or would the group like to wait? I'm not in a position at this time to say with any level of certainty that we would be able to convene an additional RAC on this. So I will put that to the group, because I think we're doing okay on time. If the people feel like their organizations have the right subject matter expert here, are prepared to have a conversation about that today. Silence means I'll decide. Let's do it. All right. Am I hearing consensus that we will take 20? I'm going to ask Kim to manage the clock for us. We will set it for 20 minutes to have this conversation with an allowance for an additional 5, and then I think we'll still be okay managing the rest of the agenda. Is everyone okay?
I just wanted to say something.
Okay, Jackie, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Ralph. Beth, thank you for your comment, and for Ralph for allowing some extra time to talk about this. I did want to just mention a couple of things about the underutilization. One, some of that is addressed in the contract and in the behavioral health reporting metrics that will be added in there, or I'm sorry, not added in there, that are included in the contract. The other piece is under E. It talks about the workforce data provided by the authority. We do have a behavioral health workforce assessment that looks at prevalence and areas of underutilization that is going to be, we're just finalizing that report, so it will be released and available soon.
What will it be called?
I can look up the name in just a moment. I think it's called something as boring as the behavioral health workforce assessment, but I'll confirm that in just a moment for you.
Well, if you could elaborate, what underutilization categories were you asking for, or did you look at?
Yeah, we looked at SUD, STMI, substance use disorder, severe persistent mental illness. We looked at it by county. We also looked at provider types, including licensed, unlicensed, peer workforce, psychiatrist, psychologist.
Well, that's interesting. There's a lot of overlap between the issues of network adequacy and underutilization, which I'm really interested in. I think that's really important to talk about. But in some ways, I think it's a little bit there's overlap, but there's also separate ways that you would look at whether prior authorizations are being denied for things, or based on population estimates, there isn't as much treatment being approved or even requested as probably should be, or you would expect to be. And maybe that's a sign of successful preventive measures, but that would be something to look at. So, and those sound like slightly different categories than what we looked at for the kind of the workforce assessment.
Yes, that is different than what we looked at in the workforce assessment, and prior authorization requirements are in the contract.
So hold on, 2 quick secs. One, I'm going to ask Beth to use the microphone. I'm having some concern that folks may not be able to hear on the phone. We want to make sure that as a public meeting, everyone that wishes to hear can do so. So Beth, please, if you want to continue that piece, and then if I can also just see by a show of hands, people that will want to speak. All right, so Beth, go ahead, and then we'll continue around this way.
I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
Okay. Actually, did I see, I'm going to go, this gentleman is, I think, raising his hand for the first time today, so we're going to engage him, and then we'll move over in this direction.
So I'm Randall Clem. I'm with Managed Healthcare Pharmacy, long-term care pharmacy, representing the folks in community care settings, a lot of IDD folks. One of the things that we have seen, and this is in regards to detecting underutilization and overutilization in the Medicare Part D world, they are charged. The plans are charged with trying to improve compliance. And in one of the efforts that they are doing that is that they are taking folks that are in their plan, and in their world, the plan folks that are in what we call community-based care are considered retail clients at the federal level. And so these plans, these national plans, are reaching out to these folks, trying to get them to increase their compliance by purchasing 90-day supplies of medications rather than going through the facility where these folks are at their contracted pharmacy. So they're actually trying to remove the client out of a system built by the pharmacy and the facility to take care of these very fragile folks and get their medications supplied to them by some mail order outfit. So my point is, what I'm trying to address here is, if we're going to measure underutilization or overutilization, how are we going to do that? How are we going to charge these MCEs to do that? And we're going to specify the service that we're looking at for overutilization or underutilization, and are we going to have specific criteria for the specific service? That's my comment and question.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, I don't know that we can respond in any level of detail to the question, but we definitely have the comment captured. And we thank you, Randy. And nice to meet you in person, by the way. All right, let's work on this side of the room. I think it was the gentleman from SEIU first.
Thanks. Sean Parkman, SEIU. So I just first want to I just appreciate the original comment here. I think this was part of what I was reacting to in the comments, the same section. And I basically was like, how would you know? And like all these questions. And so I was trying to address that by, if these kind of internal quality improvement projects over the past 15 years, were effective at doing this on their own, then we wouldn't need a rule about them. So I think adding some specificity around these concepts might help address my original point. That being said, specifically related to underutilization and overutilization for that matter, this is a very complex concept or content that involves historically underserved communities. I mean, now we're talking about social determinants of health. We're talking about, historical patterns of discrimination from the medical community, which has then sort of taught certain communities not to seek medical, this sort of work. So there is this part that has to do with internal procedures, but then there's also this community component. And so there's just a lot to unpack, and so I'm just kind of introducing a few concepts for OHA staff to sort out, later.
Okay. We thank you.
Oh. Thanks. Jeremiah Rigsby with Care Oregon, Columbia Pacific, and Jackson Care Connect. Really appreciate this topic coming up, and I do think it's also very difficult. Underutilization, overutilization broadly means like infinite things. And I think where we sit in the CCO space, aside from the obvious desire, obligation we have to make sure that members get the right care in the right place from a system standpoint, we really do wonder how underutilization factors into metrics. We wonder how underutilization factors into this idea of a 3.4% trend. I think my comment is that we've had a lot of low-hanging fruit over the last 5 or 6 years to say, let's stay at 3.4%, let's decrease emergency department utilization by X amount of percentage. Does that mean that people are getting the right care at the right time? That's not clear, right? And so I think maybe a place to start is definitely some definitions for underutilization and really some definitions for overutilization in specific areas, to your point. And maybe we start with what we're doing with metrics. Maybe we start with defining what that means for ED utilization or colorectal cancer screenings. As your places to talk about underutilization and overutilization. I know in Columbia Pacific, we could also start with oral health penetration. We only have a few dentists that see Medicaid patients. It's really hard. It's actually really easy to have a conversation about underutilization out there just because it's pretty clear why. That doesn't necessarily deal with a workforce issue that drives a lot of underutilization. And so because I think we have some things that we're working on in the state already in terms of metrics, and because underutilization and overutilization is so different by region, I think there's probably some legwork, not necessarily a rule advisory committee quite yet, but some statewide definitions that are also then region specific about what areas we would want, almost like a performance improvement plan for CCOs, for what areas we might think about evaluating why certain services are underutilized and why that makes sense in Southern Oregon versus Northwest Oregon. As we know from the Care Oregon standpoint, those experiences and overutilization, underutilization, those are driven by completely different things.
So thank you for that. So two quick things. One, I want to do a listen check to ask a kind of a yes/no question. Did I hear a request for statewide definitions of over and underutilization with some recognition of local or geographic variance?
Thank you. I should be clear. I think that is really the work of the agency. It's statewide work, but you do have to use your lens to target into what's happening in Jackson County and what services should we identify versus, and that might not be the same in the northwest portion of the state.
Okay.
So statewide,
Thank you.
Like it's different.
Thank you. And then before we get down to Cynthia, I think I owe Bruce an apology. I think I may have skipped over you after Beth, so I'd like to.
No.
Nope. Okay. Then Cynthia, I might need to apologize again. Was there one more hand in between? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to track it back to the underutilization and the metrics. I think there does need to be a state guideline and subcategories when it comes to the substance abuse disorder. Because Randy made some really good comments about the medication and how they're trying to outsource that. And when you have that type of an issue, it may look like it's underutilization, but it's actually not underutilization. It's actually just kind of an unknown category at this point. And I think we struggle with that as well with authorizations in the substance abuse disorder arena to try to track that back to our metrics when we're not authorized for that treatment. So how can you track it if we're not authorized to provide it because of the fact that there's a cap on the CCO level and then the state is kind of taken out of that arena at that point?
Could I ask you to explain after you think that you just...
Well, Beth, I think you made a very good point that it does need to be put down into some categories. You can't just say this overall applies to behavioral health. Those metrics that we're measuring within the substance abuse arena, like lab work, like medication-assisted treatment, all of those things really deserve to be subcategorized, not just blanketed under one metrics. And I think that's what you were trying to point out. I need to further dive down into that because of the OHA policies with regards to authorization.
I didn't understand what you were saying about things that you're not allowed to provide, and I'm just not well versed.
Certain services are capped at certain numbers of occurrences during a given treatment period. So say we're authorized, and I'm getting probably too specific because I'm dealing with medicated assisted treatment versus what a lot of the behavioral health providers are dealing with. But if we're only allowed to provide so many of a certain type of service, it may be viewed as underutilization when it's actually not underutilization if we're not authorized to be able to provide those services when the patient actually needs them. And I guess if we broke it down into subcategories, as you were stating before, Beth, it might make a lot more sense than blanketing under one term of metrics. So if the intent is to basically analyze them separately, the under and over, I think we need to have definitive categories as to what we're analyzing and tracking that back to the specific metrics.
Okay.
Especially when you're taking specific metrics like employment measurement.
Okay, thank you. I know, and we captured that, got that? Thank you. I know Cynthia had been in the queue, so we're going to go to her, and then I see both of you two gentlemen wish to speak, so we'll come back to you after Cynthia.
So I just want to say, this is Cynthia from All Care, that I agree with everything that has been said so far about maybe needing further definitions, but also there should be flexibility. We just look at it from pharmaceutical, behavioral health, physical health, and oral health perspective. And so someone, I think Jeremiah brought up about a low ED rate. Well, we would expect to see a higher primary care rate to correspond with that. So it's not just one measure. You have to look at maybe a cluster of other data that would also either describe barriers such as transportation. We look at ending and keep. So I guess further definition would be helpful, but flexible enough to, give more the ability to look at other data as well.
Thank you for that. We appreciate. Whichever you two gentlemen choose to go first, go for it.
Stan Gilbert, AOC MHP.
And Stan, if you can help us with the acronym, I'm sorry.
Association of Oregon Community Mental Health Program.
Thank you very much.
I think it's important to remember, too, that when you try to measure overutilization or any utilization, penetration rates in every region are going to be very different due to a variety of issues, economic factors, and other kinds of things. There are some counties in Oregon that are much higher MAT utilizers, and opioid use disorder is a higher percentage of the population than in other counties. Some counties' meth abuse is a much higher prevalence than in other counties. So to develop a statewide metric that is going to really hold CCOs to task on utilization is going to be a difficult thing to do unless you really regionalize that or you go county by county. That's true on the mental health side too. And I think those issues need to be taken into consideration.
Thank you for that comment. And the gentleman to your left. Nope. All right. Is there anyone else on the phone or in the room wishing to still speak to this? We've got 6 minutes that we can continue this conversation. We're happy to. Let me go to the phone. Anyone? All right. The last in the room.
This is Beth from OLC. I'll just say, I really appreciate people thinking about this and the openness to talking about it. It sounds like there's multiple reasons to be looking at it. There's sort of a fairness issue in terms of CCOs being compared to each other, and there's also the integral issue of our CCOs saving Medicaid money by not providing Medicaid services. And I'll reiterate, this was a great conversation, and I even just from this conversation and from some thinking I've done about this before, I do have some specific ideas, but it doesn't seem like the next 6 minutes is the right time to do that.
Understood. So
I guess I'll reiterate that I think that particular, I'm sorry, no, I'm not looking at it, sub A is just really, really inadequate. It needs to be fleshed out quite a bit. I'd love to see there be subcategories, as several of you were mentioning, in terms of what you might report on in terms of underutilization. But in addition to that, subcategories of specific ways of monitoring for underutilization, because without that kind of uniformity, I think we won't get data that would be helpful and answer the question, is underutilization kind of supporting some of the other data that's being provided. I would like to see there be some statewide modeling. There already is in the public health arena, there's modeling for a lot of particular conditions about where there are hotspots for certain health disorder or some certain conditions. And so looking at those, it wouldn't be that hard to model, well, this percentage of population is in this county, and so look at that CCO, we would expect to see, what is the penetration rate we would expect to see, and is that level of people being served? Are they receiving treatment for the CCO? And if the numbers are very much lower than what a model would predict is necessary, then I think that would be one way of assessing whether underutilization is happening. And there could be many reasons for that. It might have absolutely nothing to do with a CCO not providing or saying no to services. It might just be that people don't understand that that's something that they can receive services for. And on the other hand, I think it would be an important measure to look at prior authorization denials, and then just denials for services in general, and limitations that are placed by CCO certain caps, and see how those are impacting how people in that service area are treated. So
all
those
right.
are just some suggestions, but there's a lot more to talk about.
Okay. Appreciate that. So one, I want to thank everyone for this bit of impromptu good policy conversation. I think you all gave us a lot to go on in feedback. We've got one person I don't believe we heard from at all yet, so I'm going to give you opportunity to speak on this. Then we will conclude with SEIU as the final comment on this, and then we will move forward. Go ahead.
This is Robin from UHA. And I just want to be cautious about adding too much detail in this section, underutilization, overutilization, because it might conflict with other rules that specify, that have more detail about those items. For example, prescription drugs. There is a whole set of federal and state rules around drug use review boards, which is essentially tasked with looking at overutilization and underutilization of drugs. And those things are actually reported annually to CMS, and those are publicly posted for anyone to see. So I just want to make sure that those align if there's detail added in there.
Robin, appreciate that point. Thank you. Absolutely correct with federal drug utilization review reporting requirements. SEIU.
Sean Parkman, SEIU, just really quick comment just for something to consider.
Sure.
Related to that one element of this underutilization problem of patients not knowing what services or not feeling comfortable approaching the medical system, that one element of underutilization, just considering community health worker integration, workforce integration as part of that discussion. I know that there's a lot of work about that elsewhere. I think that's relevant to this particular element. Just throwing that out.
Thank you. All right. Again, thank you for the good conversation on this. We are going to now move to the sanctions rule. That is 410-141-3530. Very minimal changes to this rule, primarily edited for readability. There is one change that I will note for you, and that is 2I. This language was added at the recommendation of the Department of Justice. I'm sorry, 3I. So I will read that one sentence to you out loud. The authority may impose sanctions if the authority determines that an MCE acts or fails to act as follows. I, fails to comply with any legal or contractual requirements that, pursuant to the MCE contract, may form the basis for sanctions. I think that speaks for itself, but I want to note that as an addition to the group. Does anyone wish to offer a question or comment on this rule? I see a hand from Robin in the room. Is there anyone else? And let's see, who else? Bruce and anyone else? Is there going to be anyone on the phone? I want to make sure we're giving our people on the phone opportunity.
Yeah, John Curtis.
Okay. Let us start with folks on the phone, Robin, if you don't mind. John, who was the person that spoke after John? I'm sorry.
Nancy Rickenbach.
Nancy, why don't we start with you? And then we'll go to John, and then we'll come back to the room.
All right, 3D, it says state. I think that I spoke about this before, about state or authority. We need to choose something.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Number 4, it says the authority may impose a range of sanctions. So is the range of sanctions listed in our contract? I know we got an amendment this year on sanctions, but is that what we're referencing?
Off the top of my head, I believe the range of sanctions is contingent upon the federal law, which I'm blanking on which, 430-42 CFR 438 for something. But it is in deference to those, to what is at the agency's disposal in terms of issuing sanctions, intermediate sanctions under federal law. But if I'm hearing that those be teased out or articulated, we could certainly consider that.
Yeah, that would be great, as long as it matches up to whatever the contract has, or if the contract doesn't have it, so it's specified. And then 6B, it says any appeal rights under this rule. Is there a reference to the appeal rights somewhere?
I am not sure off the top of my head. That we will need to look into, and I'm looking to my team to help capture that we will check and see what the cross-reference is to those appeal rights. But thank you for that.
That's all I have.
Okay. And then John on the phone.
Yeah, just one point to 3A. My concern is one of access. That there is an MCE that's failing to provide. This provision says failure to provide medically necessary service. My concern is access to them. It's often
Okay, I appreciate that. I would respond. I think the broader inference is access, but if I'm hearing a specific request to make, I want to do a listen check. Is that a request to make reference or use the word access in some capacity there?
Yes.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, we are going to come back to the room, and we will come back, I think, to Robin to start. If I can just pause for a quick sec, though, I've seen a few more hands go up. Can I just get a reset on who's going to want to speak? All right, so we're going to work the right side of the table and then move to the left. So we'll do Robin, Bruce, and then whoever else over here, and then to the left.
Robin from UHA. So for sections 3 and 4, I have a question on who at the agency or what department can impose sanctions, and what does that internal process look like? So just so we have further clarity of
Sure.
if it's like grievance-based or if it's, audit-based.
Sure. Melissa, are you able to speak to the escalation path in contract? Apologies for potentially putting you on the spot right now, but the escalation path to sanctions as outlined in contract, and if I'm putting you on the spot, I would say that it is deference to contract, but certainly nothing would happen without the support of the agency leadership in that regard. Are you able to? If not, don't worry. Okay. So there is an escalation path, I think, that's outlined in the contract in terms of notice, notification requirements, resolution, corrective action, et cetera. Is that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And staying on this side of the room. Bruce, go ahead. Sorry? Which are you? Pick. You guys pick.
Okay, this is Beth from OLC. Let's see. I am wondering could there be, let me start again. Is there a process for making the sanction process public? So if someone anticipated that, or we knew that sanctions were being considered for a CCO but were not imposed, is that deliberation process available to the public, or the determinations as it's cited in section 2?
Sure. So to answer, I honestly, truthfully do not know. I don't want to make assumptions in a public meeting like this, but in the context that everything we are trying to do and promote transparency around this process and collaboration with community partners, that I would hope so.
Okay.
I'm noting all of this to take it back to Megan.
Thank you.
And then in 4 sub B.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's sub C. It looks like one of the sanctions is granting members rights to terminate enrollment. And I would like to ask that there be some process that if a CCO is sanctioned in any of the ways that's anticipated in the rule, that members get notification of their right to consider disenrollment if the sanctions had anything substantively to do with provision of access to services.
Okay, I appreciate that comment. I can tell you that when we wrote this about a year ago, we did write it to align very closely with the spirit and intent of the federal regulation as it relates to sanctions. But I appreciate the comment and the request for potential notification of members if this is applicable to the plan that they participate in. So thank you for that. Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Beth, for that. I think that's an excellent suggestion. So on Rule 3, under 3E, misrepresents or falsifies information furnished to an enrollee. Does this include billing that an enrollee receives repetitively, asking for payment when that enrollee doesn't really need to pay anything? And do we have any idea, does OHA have any idea how frequently that might occur?
So the first question is a very good one. I do not know the answer to. Second one, based on my lack of knowledge on the first one, I can't answer either. What I can tell you, though, again, that is open. I would anticipate that being open to interpretation and that being a good question that we are noting. I know that when we did develop this rule last year, also through a RAC process, we did so in concert with the Department of Justice. So I have no concerns about the integrity of the rule, but I think you bring up a good point in terms of what is in the weeds or could be included in that, so we can certainly contemplate that. Thank you. And let's go to the left side of the room. Show of hands, just so we, actually, let's just work from, let's start at that end this time, if we don't mind. Anyone down at Cynthia's end wish to offer a comment or question specific to the sanctions rule? I think I'm just seeing Jeremiah.
Oh, no, sorry.
Nope. Got it, all right. Bill?
I'm on. Bill Bushko with IHN on a second page in number 6. It would be helpful to have to know what timely written notification is. So what is timely? A time frame definition of OHA's response.
All right. We will.
Or notice.
Thank you very much for that comment. All right. Anyone else on this rule on the phone or in the room before we move on? All right. The next change or rule that we will go over, 410.141, 3540. This is member protections. There is literally only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words added to this rule. They are in the third line of number 2. The words "the impaired or terminated CCO" have been added, so I will read that for context. The purpose of this section only and only in the event of a finding of CCO impairment by the authority or of a termination of certification or of CCO contract of any covered healthcare service furnished within the state by a provider to a member of the impaired or terminated CCO shall be considered to have been furnished pursuant to the contract and between the provider and the CCO with whom the member was enrolled when the service was furnished. I'm seeing some facial reactions based on potential readability there, which we have tried to improve. Perhaps we've taken a step backwards there. Is that, shall I interpret the facial expression as that public comment? I'm seeing affirmative head movement in the room. It is duly noted. Thank you. Would anyone else like to offer any substantial comment specific? Yes, go ahead. I've got 2 at the end of the room.
This is Jessica. I just had a request on number 1. The last part of the sentence says, in accordance with the authority rules. I was just wondering if the OHA would add those citations.
Okay, we can look at that, certainly. Thank you. And Cynthia?
Just a question of clarification regarding CCO impairment, and that may be, it's a very familiar term. I don't know if the contract addresses that.
I believe it is a contract term.
So
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And others in the room or on the phone? Beth, let me just sit tight and do a check on the phone. Anyone on the phone? Okay, we will go to Beth and then back to Bruce, I think.
Okay, this is Beth from Oregon Law Center. In sub 3 of this rule, we'd like to ask that there be, in addition, that the CCOs provide warning to providers that are within their networks that billing clients for Medicaid services is illegal, and just added emphasis on that so that so that individual providers are aware of that.
Okay.
It's an ongoing education issue. And 6 sub C, health services rendered after the termination of the contract between the CCO and the provider. I'd like to request that or within the transition period is added into there, because I think that.
Where specifically would you request the word?
After the termination of the contract after the termination of the contract, or within the transition period, at the termination of the contract between the CCO and the provider, or within the transition period.
Okay.
Just to make sure that those services are still covered.
All right.
And then a general comment about member protections as a whole. We'd like to ask that there be some enforceability by actual OHP enrollees of member protections. And right now it's incredibly difficult for people to assert their own rights. And that might look like making people, enrollees be a party to the contract or have some enforceability of the contract by enrollees, or folding it into the rules that if member protections are not abided by, that individuals have the right to take some action, whether some private right of action or ability to go to hearing, request a hearing, etc.
Okay. I may ask that you tease that out in a little more detail in a written comment, if that is a fair request. Thank you. Bruce, go ahead.
Bruce from Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocates. So thank you, Beth, once again for those excellent comments that made regarding the billing that goes out to enrollees from CCOs. It may help identify that problem simply by educating providers that it's illegal to bill for those services. That would be very helpful. Just a general comment, the member protections, it seems so focused on there's a number of things that focus actually on the MCE, if that's the terminology, rather than CCOs that we're using now. And I kind of expected to see a list of member rights here. What rules members have to understand what their protections are.
So there is a standalone member rights rule. I don't know if you've had opportunity to review that. If not, I can show you which one at the conclusion of the meeting that is. I don't know.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, happy to. All right. Any other questions, comments? Going around once, twice. All right. We are going to move to the last rule for this first Rules Advisory Committee, 410-141-3545. This is CCO Substance Use Disorder Treatment and Facility Certification. Jackie is our subject matter expert available to assist with this. There are two noted changes in this rule, specifically one, 2A, so we will read that out loud to you. SUD treatment services are covered for eligible OHP providers or covered for eligible OHP clients when provided by a CCO under the following circumstance. The provision of SUD services shall comply with applicable rules, including those defined in Chapter 415, Division 12, 20, 50, OAR 309, Divisions 18, 19, and 22, which are the behavioral health rules and requirements under the CCO contract. So don't expect you all to be experts in what those rules are. So happy to entertain questions or comments, and Jackie can help us respond to them. Just by a show of hands before we engage. I'm seeing 1, 2. Anyone on the phone? 3 in the room. 4 in the room. All right, go ahead.
Alexa Lundgren, Cedar Hills Hospital. Are we including IMDs as providers?
Jackie, is that a question you're able to respond to? Do we need to take that offline?
I'm going to have to take that.
Okay, we can follow up there. And I think what we will try to do, I cannot promise, but we will try in the time that it takes us to get the audio files posted, which we expect to be later in the week. We will make a good faith effort to get perhaps some sort of one-pager attachment that does provide some explanation, potentially sent out either directly to RAC members or posted on that site as well. So we will do our best to do that, minding that we will be facilitating these meetings the vast majority of the next 3 weeks. Go ahead. Next comment? Yes.
Thanks, me again.
This is Jessica at Pacific Source. This is just related to number 1 and referring to the mental health organization again, related to my comment earlier in the day.
Okay.
Consider removal of that.
Thank you. And next. Anybody else? All right, on this side of the room, Bill Bushka.
Just a real simple question. Why is this rule, why are these rules necessary? I mean, what's the function of these rules?
That's a great question, Bill. So the function of these rules is to, may I please? Thank you. Sorry, I didn't have the microphone before. So thank you, Bill, for the question. So the function of these rules is to ensure compliance with the licensing of alcohol and detoxification, including residential and problem gambling facilities.
All right. Are there other questions, follow-up, or comments specific to this rule? All right. Well, I believe unless there are any other comments that concludes our discussion for now. We will open for public comment. We did have only one individual sign up to speak for public comment. Consistent with our policy, we have afforded 10 minutes, and we have said that would be divided by the number of people that wish to sign up. We will honor that. In the event that the gentleman wishes to speak for 10 minutes, that's his prerogative to do so. I welcome Dr. Jeff Clark to come up and submit public comment. And if you'd like to come up here, sir, you're welcome to by the phone so folks can hear you.
Okay. The mic.
I get to show whether I can do this or not. Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Clark. I'm the current chair of Oregon's Healthcare Workforce Committee.
Speak up just a little bit more.
Speak up a little bit more. As you may know, Oregon has an ongoing shortage of primary care and behavioral health professionals. To this end, the state has invested more than $40 million in the last biennium to incentivize providers in these meta categories to locate and remain in practice within the state. It has long been the policy recommendations of the Workforce Committee that barriers to providers to credential in these categories be removed so all qualified provider types in the state be allowed and available to practice at the top of their scope. To that end, the definition provided for primary care in these rule proposals are on the one hand too vague and the other hand too narrow. Within the state's incentive and reporting practices, the primary care meta definition includes the provider types medical doctor, doctor of osteopathy, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, and naturopathic doctor. This finite set of physical medicine provider types should be specifically enumerated in the Oregon definition of primary care providers for these rules. Likewise, a specific enumeration of state-recognized behavioral health professionals should also be specifically enumerated for these rules. Thank you.
And thank you for that very much, sir. All right. So again, we thank you all for coming and participating today. For those of you spending the afternoon with us, we will convene promptly at 1 o'clock. So this adjourns our meeting, and thank you again for your participation. And folks on the phone, thank you as well.